Super real.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hey, I'm Julian Morgans, and you're listening to What It Was Like, the show that asks people who have lived through big, dramatic events what it was like. So you know those stories about people who lose a sense, like maybe they lose their hearing or their sight, and then their other senses get turbocharged to compensate for what they lost? Well, today's story is one of those, but it's got a bit of a dark twist. Our interview today is with a guy named Matthew Weigman. He was born blind, and as a kid he developed a kind of an unusual interest in the family's telephone. He says that he was bullied and he was, back then he was kind of overweight, but on the phone he could be anyone he wanted to be. And Matt discovered that he had a unique talent for recognizing and imitating sounds. Now, this was in the early 2000s, and the phone system back then was still mostly analog. So phone lines contained all these extremely subtle little clicks and beeps that most people ignored. And these were little handshake signals that allowed the phone system to operate. And Matt could hear these. He heard them and he figured out what they meant, and this allowed him to use the phone in the same way that a hacker uses a computer. He could hack private numbers, and he could put call blocks on people he didn't like, and he even sourced the phone numbers of celebrities like Lindsay Lohan and Eminem. And he did this all through his teenage years with increasing levels of audacity and, well, just kind of malevolence, really, until eventually the FBI caught up with him and threw him in jail. So today, I want to know how Matt hears the world. We're going to unpack his experience of the sonic universe and get him to explain what it was like being a teenager with so much power. Matt, so you were born blind, right? Can you tell me about that?
Sure, absolutely. When I was born, I was diagnosed in Brunswick, Maine, with a disease or issue, a nerve issue known as or referred to as optic nerve atrophy, in which the nerves have been stunted or prevented from, making connections to the brain. I kind of like to liken it or compare it to, the connections, the multi-point connections on a circuit board. And unfortunately, some of them work. I have light perception, but, I can't really identify shapes, just shadows and outlines.
Yeah, wow. What were you like as a kid? So I guess what I'm just trying to do, because obviously I've read all these stories about you, and it's just suggested over and over again that, because your eyesight wasn't great, you really, you developed ways of hearing and a sort of very specialized ability to observe sounds that maybe the rest of us just dismiss. And I just wanted to hear your take on that.
I think that because I'm visually impaired or blind, I think that I would be more maybe receptive, if you will, to these kinds of things. For example, I think that a lot of people who can, see, they take things for granted. But likewise, I'm blind. I take my hearing for granted, right? So it's just something. It's a different avenue to reaching out and, interacting with the world, in my opinion. It's kind of like the idea of reading Braille. It's just it's a different avenue for, to reach the same goal here. I view my hearing in the same sense, but I can't compare whether my hearing would be better than yours or not, because I've never been able to see, I've never been able to hear things and experience that experience, I guess.
Yeah.
Before losing eyesight, because it never actually occurred that way for me.
Yeah, right. Let's move forward. How did you discover the phone?
Well, you're kind of jumping a little bit ahead there. When I was about 6 or 7 maybe, I wanted to learn how to dial the phone. I had another blind friend of mine who came to the United States and was in school with me for a while. He was from Bosnia. We used to talk on the phone all the time. And from that point on, not only did I call my friend, but I started just playing with the phone. And that includes everything from like just dialing random numbers, listening to error messages, and calling 911 and hanging up just to see if I could avoid the trace.
Now, we're about to get into the part of the story where we talk about chat lines. Can you just quickly tell us what exactly is a chat line?
A chat line is a forum in which people connect with each other, but it's not your average everyday, like online chat form. It's a telephone number that you can use. You can pick up a regular telephone and dial the number and use your touch-tone telephone keypad to navigate using, you kind of use your phone as a remote essentially, and you talk into it essentially. Like, for example, if you wanted to go to the next conference room, you could press 7. The previous one, you could press 6. To check like the number of participants, you could press 8. And, usually these chat rooms hold about 8 people apiece, but there's usually back in the day, it used to be about 19 of them. And then it was, then they bumped it up to 30, I guess.
I mean, I'm imagining chaos. I'm imagining just like 19 people speaking over the top of each other. Yeah,
you'd be right. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it sounds like. It's total upheaval. It's total chaos.
It does.
It's nothing but profane, vulgar stuff. And sometimes you'll have an intelligent conversation with people, but usually the typical person who calls the chat line is not somebody like me. It's somebody who is looking for girls, looking for dudes, looking for money, looking to move in with a chat liner that they don't even know because their families don't really care for them. They're having issues. A lot of them are on drugs. I think most of them are mentally ill, not really excluding myself there either. But it just seems like the chat line is full of tormented souls. It really does. Always has.
Okay. All right. So this was happening. You were kind of getting into this scene. About how old were you at this point?
I was about 13 at the time.
All right. Okay. And your social life at school wasn't great, but then, you found this like amazing social outlet on these phone lines.
Right. That's correct.
Okay. All right. And what do you felt like you gained from these things? What were you feeling?
Well, first and foremost, I felt like I was in a position where I couldn't be judged on first appearances, first impressions. I felt like I couldn't be superficially and shallowly, kind of shut down or cut down by people because they actually had to get to know my personality before they actually understood anything about me as a person. And so in a sense, I guess it made me feel like I was on a level playing field because all we were able to do was hear. We were in like the world of hearing. It was an audio world in which we all communicated and interacted with each other. And I felt good about that. Okay.
All right. So you were a young guy and you were feeling a bit kind of marginalized, but you discovered that you were suddenly on an even playing field on these chat lines.
That's correct.
Tell me how this, I mean, it sounds like quite a positive thing. Tell me how this started to curdle. How did the power kind of go to your head a bit?
Okay. So when I first hit the chat lines, I was just kind of out there to talk to people. I met a guy who went by the handle of Royal, and Royal lived very locally, lived very close to me. And, he was always into this like freaking scene, and he was into like, telephone stuff, and he would just like play weird error messages and recordings in the room. But I've heard some of these things before because I had already been playing around on the telephone for a long time.
Sorry, hold on. What's freaking?
Oh, freaking is the kind of the act of wanting to understand. It's pretty much the idea of being a telephone enthusiast. A freaker is somebody who likes to understand and exploit the public switch telephone network, at least historically. But now we've kind of moved on to much more progressive and serious technological stuff. So it's a guy or a gal who kind of just says, "Hey, I'm interested in the phone, and I'd like to understand the network and how things work and how the signaling protocols work and how things are connected, how connectivity works, and sometimes even the inner workings of telephone companies themselves."
Okay, right. And you became a massive freaker. Now, my understanding of this time is that you started to use your phone in the way that a hacker might use a computer. Like at first, you were basically doing elaborate prank calls, but then you started to learn more about how the phone network operated, and you started getting high on that power, I guess. Can you actually remember the first bad thing that you did?
I called in one day. I was having an argument on the chat line with somebody from Seattle, and I called the phone company, which was Quest out there at the time, and I just said, hey, I'm a technician and I'm working on this customer's line and I don't want any calls coming in. I need you to, disable the incoming calls. And the guy said, you must be a new tech. And I said, yeah, I just started out. And my voice was kind of light, you know what I mean? So
Because you're a kid.
I had some trouble. Right. I was about 13 at the time, 13 or 14. And what happened is he said, well, look, the next time you call in, just tell him you need to busy it out. And I was like, oh, okay, wow, thanks. I appreciate that. And I was like, wow. So I hung up with him and I called the number and I'm like, wow, it's not working. These calls aren't going through. So it kind of amped me up. I actually stood out of my computer chair and jumped up and down, believe it or not. That did happen. And after that, it just kind of opened Pandora's box.
Yeah, okay. It feels to me like some of the reason you were able to pull these stunts off is because you've got this kind of flair for like this secret talent for method acting. I guess what I'm talking about is not just the way you imitated voices, but also the background noises in people's offices. Maybe you can give me an example of this.
Okay, so for example, let's just say that I wanted to go after a chat liner and make sure they didn't have a telephone at their address anymore, which happened to one specific gentleman in 2007 that I remember. What I did was I kind of just thought about it. I'm like, if I was a security guy, if I worked at the fraud department at a phone company or asset protection at a phone company, I'd probably be in a pretty nice office. It'd be pretty plush. I'd probably be able to kind of kick back in a nice swivel chair with the ergonomic, the rest there for your lumbar, the lumbar support and all that good stuff. And I kind of got one of those chairs and I got a really nice 4-line AT&T, business phone because I realized that every time you call somebody who is super official sounding, they always pick up on speaker first and then they pick up. So you kind of hear that click, can I help you kind of thing. Really?
Okay. Wait. So I mean, these are small considerations. Like this is,
very small.
Like the devil's in the details. So you start with speakerphone and then you switch over.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's how I used to initiate all my calls. I really did.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
That's very devious. What about accents? Because you're pretending to be people from all around the country, different accents.
Yeah, it's interesting. For example, when I started out on the New England chat lines, I didn't really have much of a New England accent either, even then. But I did have friends and things like that. But I was kind of antisocial, and I felt like people really couldn't understand me. So it wasn't always a matter of not being able to have friends. But I never talked like the people around me. But I can. So it kind of started out like, "Yep, how are you? This is Kevin McLaughlin. I'm out here working on a customer work order. Need a little bit of assistance, something like that." And then it went from that to, "Hey, I got to sound like somebody from down south, maybe Texas, like, hey, how are you? This is outside field tech John Green working on a customer line, kind of thing."
That's pretty good.
Something like that.
That was a convincing Texan accent.
Yeah, it's just one of those things, and I don't know, it all depended what I was doing. Sometimes I would have to just strip myself. Now, anytime I called in wanting to do something pretty serious, one time I undertook a project to secure and obtain the information on 10 AT&T security officials, which I obtained from AT&T on one phone call from one specific gentleman who became my what I would consider a friend. He wouldn't have considered me a friend, but we had established a pretty good rapport under false pretenses on my part. He assumed that I was a AT&T fraud investigator. But yeah, I undertook that project. It was a interesting project. I never use accents when I call in from high level departments at the phone company, at Social Security Administration. I don't just call in to the phone companies. I've called into multiple establishments that would hold records about people's personal information or things that I would need. And I never have an accent when I call from a position of real authority.
Why is that?
In my opinion, I believe that people who refer to themselves as cultured in the United States specifically try to eradicate or stomp out any semblance of an accent. I do believe that.
That's a very interesting sociological theory. Why? What's the basis of this?
I don't know. It just seems like what I've always known to be true. I've only heard one guy at AT&T, and I just think he couldn't do it. He probably tried, but it seemed like he couldn't get rid of that accent. It was very light, but everyone I've ever heard has just been like, "Hey, how are you? This is so and so." Just not really much of an accent.
Sure.
They're really forceful with the way they speak. They're extremely assertive. They'll make threats, and I just kind of adopted those ideas.
We're going to take a quick ad break here, and we'll be right back with more What It Was Like.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month slows. Full terms at mintmobile.com.
Get the best workout with the best-kept secret in fitness. Hydro, the state-of-the-art at-home rower. Hydro engages 86% of your muscles, delivering the ultimate full-body workout in just 20 minutes. From advanced to beginner, Hydro has over 4,000 classes that are shot all over the world and are taught by Olympians and world-class athletes. For a 30-day risk-free trial with free standard shipping, go to hydro.com and use code ROW500 to save up to $500. That's HYDROW.com, code ROW500.
Right. This is probably a good time to talk about Lindsay Lohan. Can you tell me how you got her number?
There was a pretty big online address book hack, and we called her up, and somebody gave me the old number for her, and it was disconnected. And I called up to T-Mobile and pulled the new one from the customer service department. I portrayed myself as a person who worked at a store locally and was trying to present the customer with their phone number, which they were not able to find because they were visually impaired. So what I did was I used my own vision problem, thought about a problem that I could have, and used that and made it seem like a pretty realistic situation, and made the representative at the phone company want to help. So that's how I pulled her number.
So the person at T-Mobile had no idea that they were about to just hand out Lindsay Lohan's number, and thought it was just like an innocuous, regular civilian phone number that they were giving to you.
That's correct. See, I didn't provide a name. I just gave the phone number. That's correct. It was weird. I'm like, dude, it's not going to work. And I was on a conference with a couple guys, and they're like, yeah, dude, I don't think this is going to work. And I said, you know what? I'm going to try it anyway, because I can't think of any other way to do it. So that's kind of what happened.
All right. So all right. So you call up Lindsay Lohan. What do you say?
I called up Lindsay Lohan, and I said, hey, how are you? What's going on? I found your number. And she said, well, who are you? And I just kind of pretty much said, look, it doesn't matter. And then, I was kind of a young teenage kid, so I made some profane statements, some sexually profane statements, I guess.
Oh, Matt. Matt.
Yeah, I know it.
You blew it.
But
you blew it. You could have.
I sure did.
You could have been in a movie with her. You could.
I don't know about that.
And what about who else did you call? Who are some other celebrities you got?
I called Mr. Mathers. Also accessed his voicemail. I used to love to play his voicemail messages for other chat liners.
Wait. As in Eminem?
Eminem, that's correct.
Eminem. All right. How did you get Eminem's number?
What happened was I called up. I got the number to the record label. I think it was Aftermath or whatever it was. I think it was something like that. And it was a 212 number. And I got into the voicemail. I had used a war dialer and some other stuff to try to access the voicemail, and it wasn't working for me. So I started hand scanning, just dialing numbers manually, typing them manually into my touch tone, telephone's keypad. And eventually the passwords, it's just like, I did literally 0000, 0001, 0002. And then I just got really tired, and I just said, how about 9876? Okay, that's not working. 1234, and bam, it literally let me in. It literally let me in.
All right, so Eminem's password is 1234.
I don't know about anymore, but that was a long time ago.
He probably hasn't changed it. So
yeah, I would hope he had changed it by now. But it was I had his voicemail, and I had access to Mr. Rosenberg's voicemail as a kid. his producer or manager, and
so what was
really, I didn't want to do anything to them. I wanted to listen to their voicemail messages, and I kind of wanted to. I don't know. I thought it was really interesting to listen to some of the these fan messages, especially from some of these chicks. They just sounded like, you got like groupies out there, but you got like psychotic guys out there too who are, hey man, I want to. I've got a record. I mean, I'm really, I've got a lot in me, and I like to listen to it. Even a couple times, I had a buddy on the chat lines who could sound like Eminem a little bit. So, he called up. He's like, "Yeah, why don't you rap for us? Just rap for us." And then he would just say, "Oh, you suck. I'd never let you on my label." And we'd just hang up, and that was a prank, And
yeah. That's wild.
I never obtained any information like that would be like really valuable or anything like that.
Sure,
but just like interesting messages from people. And
did you
one day?
Sorry, I got to ask. As a I was a Eminem fan back in the day. Did you ever actually speak to Eminem?
Yes, I was going to mention that. Yeah, I got his cell phone number. He had called his number. He had called Paul's number. Excuse me, the manager, and left a voicemail message. And there was an option to get the header information, the envelope information, which obviously included a phone number. So of course, I had to call that number. So I called the number and I said, "Hey, what's up, man? My name is Matt. I got your number. I'm a pretty big fan, And he said, "Well, look, don't call my number." And he hung up, and I called back and I said, "Listen, man, it's not really smart for you to do that. It's not a smart idea." And he just said, "Fuck off." And I never did anything to him, but it actually kind of amused me. And, it's one of those situations, I guess.
You threatened Eminem.
I don't know about threatened him, but I was a kid. What could I have really done except for maybe turn his phone off? I mean, the guy's worth millions and millions. He could have found me immediately probably, but, thank God it never came to that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And did you say you called Mitt Romney, like the Republican?
That's correct.
Yeah. What happened?
Well, what happened was the way I got his number is his son prank called him on YouTube, and he failed to mute the microphone before he entered the touch tones on a phone, and so I decoded the touch tones just by hearing them.
Okay, so hold on. So this is really interesting because before, when we were talking about your ability to observe sounds that maybe the rest of us with eyesight, we sort of dismiss this stuff. But you're listening to a video and there's this like beep boop beep 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 boop boop sort of noise of like the touchpad on the phone. You hear that and you just like the numbers, right? Is that what you're saying?
That's very accurate.
All right. See, that's what I mean. You've definitely got better hearing than me. I couldn't do that.
Okay, well, yeah, no, I've been doing that forever. Like, I just kind of, it's almost weird to me, like, and in my mind, the touch tones actually sound like that. Like, for example, when I press 1, when I say the word 1, to me, that tone is kind of like, oh, you know what I mean? Because it has that sound. It almost sounds like a 1. It's weird. I can't describe it. It's just like these sounds kind of, they correlate to something that I just kind of assigned to them, I guess, mentally. And I know what they are. I mean, I could have, when I was a kid, I could probably decode maybe 16, 20 digits. I could do a credit card number easy.
Wow. Okay, so anyway, back to the Mitt Romney situation. You hear the phone number getting dialed, and then what?
I said, "Man, this guy cannot be that stupid. He can't. It's not possible." And I called the number, and he picked up. I said, "Hello, Mitt." He goes, "Yeah, who's this?" And I just started laughing. And I said, "I can't believe." I said, "You're Mitt Romney." I said, I said something about, I heard eventually you're going to run for president. Something like that. And he said, I think he said something along the lines of stick it up your ass, and kind of hung up the phone. It wasn't very polite.
That's pretty impolite for Mitt Romney. Like Mitt Romney,
understandable, but
Mitt Romney's a pretty straight edge, like conservative kind of Jesus loving guy, I think.
Well, that's his right.
Yeah,
that's his right, of course.
No,
but,
of course. But compared to Eminem's, fuck off.
I think Eminem would have been all right. Like, I think if Eminem kind of knew who actually did it and thought about the story or whatever, he would be like, whatever, no big deal.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right. So we're gonna jump ahead in your story here, and I guess what listeners need to know is that you continued in this way, terrorizing people and hacking the phone system until you were 18. At which point the FBI took a much more serious interest in you because suddenly you were old enough to be prosecuted. You probably should have kept your head down, but rather than doing that, you started harassing a guy who worked for Verizon. And if anyone doesn't know, Verizon's like the big American telco company. And they assigned a fraud investigator named Billy Smith to your case. And you started calling Billy Smith. You started calling his house and freaking out his family.
Well, not only was I calling them, but I would call them from numbers that they had just called. So I had access to the switch, and I could actually actively monitor the numbers that they were calling. And I'll be honest with you, he actually must have told his family that I was, going after him. He knew who I was. He knew exactly who I was, because one time I called up at 2 a.m. and I called from all sixes. And I said, yeah, where's Smith at? Where's he at? Put him on the phone. You know what I mean? And his son said, I think it was his son. He sounded young. He said, dude, get off the phone, you blind fuck.
Ooh.
What did he say?
Ooh.
Exactly.
That must have hurt a bit.
No, it didn't. I actually thought it was funny. But
Okay.
the truth is I was pretty stoned at the time.
Okay, but then you upped the ante, right? Because you decided to go visit this guy in person, like actually go to his house.
I actually decided that we were going to go do that. And it was interesting. We drove over state lines, which in itself, by the way, is a federal offense for this reason. To do that, it's a violation of interstate commerce. And you can't do that. Obviously, it's really bad. They're going to hammer you for it if you get hemmed up in the legal system for it. And they did that to me. But so we showed up at his address. It was me, Royal, the one who drove me, and my brother.
All right, so you show up in a car.
Sure. At his residence on a Sunday, May 18th. I remember that date, 2008.
He must have been terrified.
No, he was actually quite calm.
What happened?
So we pull up. At first, he wasn't there, so we went and grabbed some things to eat. We grabbed a couple sandwiches and had some food and went back to see the guy, and he was doing some yard work. And me and Royal got out of the vehicle, and we approached Mr. Smith, and I said, hey, Mr. Smith, how are you? And he said, who are you? I said, you know exactly who I am, man. It's Matt. You've been harassing me for months. What's up, dude? Just kind of like right there in your face kind of thing. And then he started to kind of lose it a little bit. He said, hold on, I'll be right back. Sit on the bench. There was no bench there. He just ran inside to 911 real quick, to call that number. And at the time I had told Royal, I said, dude, we better get the hell out of here, dude. This dude's he's calling the police, of course. And Royal just kind of froze up. And, they just kind of separated us. The police separated us, and they called the feds in Dallas because that's who he was working with, and that's who he referred them to or told them to speak with.
All right, okay. So after all of that skirmish out the front of this house, you get arrested, you go to court. What were you convicted on?
I was convicted on one count of obstruction of justice and the other one of conspiring to commit access device fraud.
Got it. Okay, and they gave you 11 years.
11 years, 3 months.
Ugh, geez. That is a long time for a kid. All right, so what happened when you got to prison? I mean, I'm guessing that for the other prisoners, you were kind of a rock star.
I don't know about that, but yeah, it seemed like they knew exactly who I was as soon as I got there. And I heard some guy say, that's a blind dude that used to screw up the phone system or something. I read about this dude somewhere. And, it's kind of interesting to hear people say that kind of stuff about you. But to be honest with you, I had an easier time. This may sound really crazy, but I actually had a less dysfunctional time in prison than I did growing up as a kid. That sounds interesting to say that, because the reason for that, I guess, is that everything was regimented and there was a routine, and I didn't have that as a kid. And I had it in prison, and I felt like I was kind of like leveling out even. And now that I'm out of prison, I feel like I'm losing that again, that sense of regiment. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, structure is really important.
Absolutely.
So
I have to be occupied. My mind just moves too fast. I've got to be occupied, right?
Yeah, right. Okay, and I think that you've told me previously that prison was quite a constructive, quite a good environment for you as well.
Sure.
Just because you were meeting lots of other people, like socially, it probably expanded your world a bit.
Absolutely. One of the first guys I met was a Boston Irish mob guy. And I went into the housing unit, and people said, hey, this guy's from the Boston area. maybe he'll talk to you. And I said, all right, cool. So he walks up to me and I said, hey, how are you? And he says, hey, what's your name? So we exchanged, names or whatever. And he said, what are you here for? And I told him. And he said, well, how much time did you get? And I said, I got 11 years, 3 months. And I said, well, what about you, sir? And he said, well, he said, I've been sentenced to 9 life sentences.
Oof.
That kind of scared me a little bit. But, I'm kind of sarcastic. And I'm like, what do they think? You were a cat? You know what I mean? Like, and he actually, he's one of these old Boston guys. So in his Boston accent, his really brash Boston accent, he said, yeah. He says, you're a weird kid. He said, you're not making me feel any better. I'm sitting here dying every day. And,
he must have killed a lot of people. Nine.
Yeah, absolutely. He was part of. He was a pretty serious guy. He is a pretty serious guy. Not saying that he was a great guy and should be allowed to run around in society, but he was never bad to me. As a matter of fact, he was so serious that Whitey Bulger himself was trying to provide evidence against him to the feds.
Okay, all right. That's pretty serious. So you told me previously that you sort of met a couple of positive role models in prison. That maybe
that's correct.
Maybe you found the father figures in prison that you never had as a child growing up. Tell me about that.
So there were quite a few of them, actually. A few that I really, gravitated towards, and they kind of gravitated towards me. One of which is actually from Maine, and we lived in the same cell for quite some time. And he would just kind of say, "Look, man, why do you want to be part of the prison thing? I mean, it's good to work out and good to be out on the yard and on the track, but there's a lot of drama out there." He said, "Man, why don't you go down to education and get your GED?" He said, if you get your GED, man, I'll throw like a little party for you in here. Like I'll buy a bunch of stuff from the commissary, the canteen or whatever, and we'll have like a little thing or whatever. And I said, dude, I don't want a GED, man. So he just kept on giving me shit about it every day until I just decided to say, hey man, screw it. I'm going to go ahead and get it. And he, what he did was he just said, look, kid, you're probably not even going to pass, you dummy. He knew I wasn't dumb. He just said it to irritate me, and it worked. I passed, I got the GED and I passed it, and, he stuck to his word.
Hey, that's awesome. Well done. And what about time? I guess I'm curious to know how fast time actually goes in prison. Does it feel like the years just trickle by, like you've just been in prison your whole life?
Not really. The prison experience itself was actually, it was a sad, really tragic type of thing. But to be honest with you, in some ways, it was kind of a blessing, because it took me out of an environment that was extremely dysfunctional and not conducive to my growth as a human, as an independently functioning individual. And it was a very toxic environment. Didn't have the greatest mother or father, but I feel like I grew in prison. The years they weren't slow. They didn't stand still. They flew by, believe it or not. They flew by. But what was scary to me about that was the idea that, yeah, okay, it's great that they're flying by, but these are still years of my life, and they're still wasted. They're still wasted.
Yeah.
And before I got out of prison, I told my buddy Mike this, and he says, no, they're not wasted. He says, you learned a lot, kid. He said, it's unfortunate, but no, your life is not over, dude. It's not over. You're good. Just, get out there and try to view the world, from, the perspective of having, your glass half full opposed to half empty.
So what did you learn in prison?
Well, I feel like I've really just kind of learned to be a man. I really did, because I didn't have that structure I needed. I was never really I was kind of straightforward, but I always, did things in total anonymity. I've always been kind of like a wild card, I guess. And I kind of had to discipline myself in those environments because, not everybody's going home. Not everybody's happy. And you got to kind of make sure that, you leave. You actually have a date that you're going to go home on. Some of these guys here don't. So, I tried to, I guess in some ways I became more disciplined. I became a very avid reader, reading lots of philosophy, different things like the likes of Ayn Rand and Leonard Peikoff and different writers. Did nothing but read and work out while I was there and try to socialize with people. And every now and then use a contraband smartphone that I wasn't supposed to have that I purchased on the yard. But,
So you went in a kid, in some ways quite a traumatized kid. It feels like you're really trying and probably failing to work through a lot of baggage that you'd been lumped with growing up.
Absolutely.
And in many ways, it sounds to me like prison was almost the remedy. It was the medicine that you couldn't get through freaking, through like swatting. It gave you this thing that you needed.
Well, the truth is that I needed to be stopped. I needed to go to prison. That's the truth.
I'm really curious about. So you talked about some quite positive characters and role models that you met in prison.
Sure.
But did you get a glimpse at the other end of the spectrum? I mean, there's like some really
absolutely
terrifying people in prison. Did you ever meet any serial killers or anything like that?
I met a guy who was a meth dealer and a contract killer for some meth dealers in the state of Pennsylvania. He was in prison. He had 3 life sentences plus 85 years. And the reason for that was he was extorting people for money. He committed a number of murders. And one of the cases in his court paperwork was a gentleman whose legs he placed in a wood chipper and proceeded to turn the wood chipper on so that he could, force the gentleman to tell him or reveal where the location of money and drugs were. And the truth, I asked him directly, I said, well, so what happened? He's like, well, I never got the money. And I said, well, why not? He's like, well, he said, I left the wood chipper on too long and he went into shock. And I said, so what happened then? Yeah, he said, I shot him in the head 2 times and left. I left and loaded him up and left. That's it.
Jesus Christ.
And I do keep in contact, or have up until recently kept in contact with a couple of guys that, looked out for me and were decent while I was there. And I found out that specific gentleman had been killed in the shower. They had killed him. Somebody had gotten a hold of him and stabbed him up. That was last year.
So how are you doing now? I mean, you've been out of prison for a couple of years. How's your life? What are you doing?
Not much. Not too much. Been trying to find a job. Been trying to, kind of branch out. But as far as employment, as far as doing too much, as far as that's concerned, I can't find anything. Nope.
I mean, we've had this conversation, and you've I am fairly well persuaded that you have an incredible technical mind and that you could be of great advantage to any kind of tech company. It feels to me like they should just take you on. Like it feels to me like, all right, you've done some crazy sort of pretty inconsiderate shit in the past, but I don't know. I could imagine you being useful to like Google or something.
Yeah, I was thinking, I'm like, man, I don't really want to do anything like, major maybe, but like even like being an Apple at home advisor to help people with accessibility stuff would be great. Like, you know what I mean? Just something. I just want to be able to say, hey, I can provide for myself. I can send my girlfriend some flowers. She likes orchids. I want to be able to do that stuff. Not that she asks, but you know how it is. You just kind of want to do those things, and it's not always easy for me to do those things. You know what I mean? So, and that kind of like what adds to her, as being a valuable and great person, like, character-wise, that she doesn't really worry about that kind of stuff. I'm the one who worries about that. I want to provide. I want to forge my own destiny, and I feel like I'm being, prevented from doing that, and pretty difficult to deal with.
So, what are the things that make you happy?
Playing drums, talking to my lady, dealing with her. She's great. I read quite a bit still. And, I'm into my progressive metal and all that kind of stuff. I'm a jazz drummer, progressive metal and all that cool stuff. But, that type of stuff makes me happy. Reading books makes me happy, thinking about my future, and hopefully thinking about being at a different place in life, a better place in life, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
I guess dreaming makes me happy if you really want the truth at the end of the day.
Yeah, man. I hear you. Yeah, dreaming makes me happy too. I think if I'm really honest, it's like daydreaming is probably my favorite thing to do in the whole world. Matt, I just want to thank you so much for your time. It's been a really interesting pleasure talking to you. And I just want to thank you for your honesty and for your self-reflection. And just for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Certainly appreciate that.
And that's our interview with Matt Weigman. If you've enjoyed this episode and you're thinking, hey, I've got a story like that, or it's kind of similar to that, something interesting but surprising and maybe a bit unique, then please get in touch. We're always looking for story suggestions or just feedback or whatever. So hit me up. I'm at Julian Morgans on Instagram or Morgans Julian on Twitter. Today's episode was produced by Rachel Tuffery. It was edited and mixed by Jimmy Saunders, who also did our theme music. Our cover art is by Naomi Lee Beveridge. And a big thanks to Joseph Liu, who was our research assistant, and he was the one who actually managed to track Matthew down. And this has been a Super Real production.